Welcome to Nowhere to Hide. This is the first episode of what is going to be a twice-a-week program, Wednesday and Friday evenings at 5 o'clock, in which I, your host, Brian Hyde, am going to sit down and go over some of the examples of places where the media could have and probably should have got something right, but somehow failed to. Now, I want to make very clear, I'm not here to generate anger or hatred towards mass media, but I'm here to acknowledge a problem that has been going on for a very, very long time. And that is, how do you know truth from error? In fact, let me give you a little bit of background just so you can understand where I'm coming from. I've been a commentator for the last 30. Wow. 30 years. It's been a great ride, and I've seen a lot of things happen in that time, including the advent of the internet and instant information available on our smartphones and at our fingertips, basically 24/7. But something that really opened my eyes to what can happen when media takes an interest not in just promoting just the facts, the facts, ma'am, like Joe Friday, but actually an activist role in trying to promote a type of narrative that steers the audience in a very predictable direction. It happened back in 1994, 1995, when the Times News in Twin Falls, which was where I lived at that time, hired a new reporter. Now, I'm not going to give you this reporter's name. I don't know what he is doing with his life, but this guy was a graduate of the University of Idaho Law School, and he was a master with words, as you might expect a law school graduate would be. That lawyerly training taught him how to use words to their greatest effect, much as you would expect an attorney to be able to do. This was at a time where, based on, first of all, Waco, the so-called assault weapons ban of 1994, there was quite an interest in Idaho and in other states in the militia movement. Now, whatever you may think of the militia movement, there is no doubt that was like Pavlov's bell ringing for much of the mainstream press. Ooh, they did not like people organizing themselves or threatening to stand up and assert their Second Amendment rights, in the face of a government that was, very credibly and very openly expanding its powers. So there were a couple of militia meetings that were held in Twin Falls, Idaho. Now, you have to understand, these were not shadowy affairs that were held, in some dark basement somewhere in the warehouse district where nobody could access it without, the secret knock or passcode. These were held actually at KMVT Television's community room. And the people who attended those meetings were, for the most part, at least as far as I could see, I went to a couple of them myself because I like to go to the source rather than just, depend on somebody else. Tell me what it was all about. And what I saw were people who were legitimately concerned about the direction that freedom was going in their country. Now, the press, and this includes much of the local press, but especially the Times News, was extremely hostile towards anything having to do with this militia movement. And they generated some of the most malicious militia reporting that I've ever seen. And I'm going to give you an example of what that looked like. It wasn't a matter of simply spreading a big, bold lie. These guys are all here. They want to overthrow the government, and they're the ones who wanted to blow up the federal building in Oklahoma City. No, it was something much more subtle, which to me actually makes it even more insidious. This lawyerly trained reporter used weasel words to report on the meeting. Now, there were maybe a couple dozen people, maybe a few dozen people who showed up for these meetings. The vast majority of them were senior citizens. What does that tell you? I mean, it's not like there was a bunch of Timothy McVeighs all getting together and threatening to overthrow the government. What this reporter said in his newspaper article was, he said, and I quote, "Though no swastikas were openly displayed, at least one of the adherents had a tiny German flag emblazoned on his shoulder." Now, there's some fact to what he was saying there. First of all, there were no swastikas openly displayed, but who expected them to be anyway? But the second thing was, yes, there was an elderly gentleman there wearing a military surplus West German sweater. And there was a tiny little Deutschland flag right there on his shoulder of his sweater. But this was not in any way some kind of allegiance to Adolf Hitler. This was no allegiance to neo-Nazi or white supremacist ideology. This was a guy who, as part of his preparations and as part of shopping for a good bargain, bought a military surplus article of clothing. And if you know anything about military surplus clothing, look, it's not for everybody. Not everybody's willing to shed their fashion consciousness. But for those who are looking for a very durable, well-constructed item that will work as functioned and work for a long, long time, to keep you warm, it represented a good bargain. I never forgot that lawyer reporter's words, though, and how just trying to cast this shade and imply that, well, although they didn't openly goose step around and, snap, Sieg Heil salutes around, there was the implication that somehow there was something like that going on. And that always stuck with me as a particularly underhanded thing. I mean, a bold, open-faced lie is pretty easy to confront. But when our mass media brings just a little nuance, a little bit of shade, a hint, an inference, a suggestion that maybe there's something really nefarious going on, that's when people tend to buy into it. People who are too lazy to do their own examination of what's really going on. So here's where I'm coming from, and here's where I want to take this program in the week ahead and the days ahead. This is not about let's all pile on and let's hate the mainstream media. It's about questioning everything that is coming to us through mass media. Not because we're right and everybody else is wrong. I don't have all the answers. But it's essential because there are no unbiased sources out there that we are willing to question everything that comes to us. In fact, you think about anything you know about a person, anything you know about a current event, it's been pretty well worked over by the time that information gets to you through mainstream media sources. And I don't think this should count as any kind of a conspiracy theory. Some may want to dismiss it as such, but there are certain narratives that tend to be favored by mass media sources. They are narratives which tend to favor the status quo, which tend to play to the people who are in power, which tend to justify whatever the people in power are doing. If what has happened to us with the COVID response over the last couple of years hasn't convinced you that there's something like this at play, well, you should definitely be watching the show, because you'll find that there are plenty of examples, and we'll cite them for you chapter and verse. But the first thing you need to understand is there is no such thing as an unbiased source, and that includes me. I'm not expecting you to believe everything that I share with you. What I'm going to try to do is fill in some of the gaps that have been left in mass media stories here in the state of Idaho and in our local news that could have given us a more complete understanding of what's going on. It's not important whether you agree with me or not. It's not important whether you agree with these mass media sources or not. What's important is that you understand that if all you know about a given person or a given topic comes to you through mass media, you are working from an incomplete standpoint. Now, notice that's not the same thing as saying you're totally wrong and you're stupid and you're evil, because I don't believe that. We're all trying to walk our way out of the swamp of misinformation. And by misinformation, I don't mean information that we need to protect the world from through fact checkers and official sources and bureaucracies that exist to keep us all on the same talking points that are being issued by officials. When I talk about misinformation, I'm talking about just we have an incomplete understanding of what is going on. And we're all somewhere in that journey. Some folks, now I count myself as one of these folks, I've been paying attention hard for about the last 30 years. Some people are further behind me in that journey. Some people are way ahead of me in that journey. The goal here isn't to convince you that, oh yeah, I'm right and you're wrong. The goal here is to convince you to take a closer look at everything that comes your way and question whether you're really being given a full enough perspective to make an informed decision or an informed conclusion about the topic at hand. I do believe this, though. The most qualified fact checker for you is you and your conscience. And if you're slogging your way out of that swamp of misinformation, I'm just here to leave some markers along the journey for your consideration. And hopefully it's something that you'll feel inclined to, leave markers for the people behind you and tell them about this program. So each week, this program will be highlighting examples of media bias in local and statewide media. We'll be encouraging our viewers to question everything that you hear, everything that you see, everything that you read. We'll also be teaching our viewers how to propaganda-proof themselves. Now, that doesn't mean you have to subscribe to a particular ideology. You do not have to be this conservative, to understand what's being talked about here. You just have to be serious enough about owning your own worldview and unwilling to let somebody else do the thinking for you, that you're willing to look a little bit deeper, ask a few more questions, and above all, be willing to ask the question, who benefits from the way that this story is being reported? For example, are there certain buzzwords that are being used to elicit an emotional response? Now, we've had some high-profile, murderous shooting rampages that have been dominating the news cycle here for the last few days. Are there any catchphrases that come to mind? Or things that are emotion-laden in terms of the headlines and the way that these stories are presented, that are designed to get you feeling and experiencing and emoting more so than actually thinking critically about what really happened? This is why you have to ask, who benefits from the way that this story is being reported? I'm not suggesting that there's a grand conspiracy, a smoke-filled room with, where the media gets all of their talking points. At the same time, I am going to suggest that if you look at mass media generally, and I'm talking heritage media, the newspapers, or at least what's left of them, much of the TV news, and some of the different online news sources, you're going to find that there is a surprising amount of uniformity in their reporting. And to the degree that uniformity tends to favor the status quo or tends to favor those who are already in power, well, that may not necessarily be in your best interest or my best interest. So hopefully that's a non-threatening introduction to what Nowhere to Hide is going to be about. My goal is to take a bold stand for the truth, to encourage people to vigorously seek after the truth, but underlying that goal is a desire to do it without bringing more anger or more division to an already volatile situation. You don't have to use your imagination to look around us and see that there is enough crisis to go around. In fact, there are multiple overlapping crises that we're having to deal with. The people who would convince you that, no, it's all a product of your imagination, or you should just trust people in authority to worry about those kinds of things. Generally, those people are not working in your best interest. And this is not just a matter of, what your political affiliation is going to be or how you will cast your vote. Sometimes this comes down to, will you have the opportunity to earn a living? We saw with vaccine mandates that this can become a very real threat. It may interfere with your ability to live your life and to enjoy the use of your natural rights. It may affect the ability to have your kids actually taught things that matter as opposed to indoctrinated with things that 10 years ago would have been unthinkable. So get comfortable with questioning the narrative. There are times when it will make you uncomfortable. But again, I got to reiterate, my goal here isn't to make you mad. It's not to flex my mighty brain muscles. I'm an average guy. But I'm an average guy who loves the truth, and I'm willing to be misunderstood. I'm willing to be called names. I'm willing to be misrepresented as something that's a grave threat to all that we hold dear in our democracy. But I paid the price to know what I know. And that doesn't mean I have all the answers. I'm keeping an open mind. But there are some issues on which I've paid enough of a price. I'm willing to commit to the truth. And I'm encouraging you to take a similar approach in your life, because this is the time when it really counts. We live in a time of crisis, and if there is one thing that is the utmost duty of citizens in times of crisis, is to think as clearly and independently as possible. Now, if you have a media that is largely working against that or trying to keep you from noticing things, this is, by the way, this is what most misinformation is. It's not a matter of, well, that's harmful information or data that will just will destroy your life or cause you harm. No. More often than not, the misinformation and disinformation that comes at us is either things that are never reported on or conveniently omitted from news reports, or reported in such a way that we don't encounter real information about what the ruling class is up to that could prove harmful to their agendas. It's going to be a fun ride. I'm looking forward to it, and I hope you'll join us for our live stream each Wednesday and Friday, 5 p.m. Mountain Time. We'll have plenty of opportunities to engage with comments. We'll have guests. We'll have wonderful video clips, but we're going to have examples of where the media has fallen short in giving you the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And hopefully we all come away a little bit better informed, whether we agree or not. I'm Brian Hyde, and this is Nowhere to Hide.